Hey everyone, it's Sabrina. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be doing a reading journal updating for the month of May. I'm starting on the second page of 2024 books because remember I did a larger book cover and I'm doing things a little bit out of order. I printed a ton of books for May and June, so that's why I'm doing this section first, and then I'll flip back to the beginning and fill out the rest of the stats. I read a total of 11 books, so it was a good reading month. Well, like I always say, if you read one book, that's a great reading month. But overall, great month, and I think had 4 or 5 favorite books. It was really hard to choose which book was my absolute favorite. I thought about choosing Frozen River, but in the end I went with Ready or Not, and that's kind of how I'm going to base my color scheme off of. I also read a nonfiction or listened to a nonfiction, the Viola Davis memoir, Finding Me, and that was just incredible. Okay, flipping back to the front of my book for the goals, I completely filled in the nonfiction section because at this point I think I've read or listened to 12 nonfiction books, so that's really good. I also decided to erase the different lines and then add in some more for the Goodreads. And I think one other, the third goal, I'm not sure what that one was, but filled those goals in, and again, I don't know if I will hit 50,000 pages, but I come close to it. Oh, the number 3 goal was audiobooks. So yes, I'm doing great with audiobooks. Audiobooks are the best, and I just really enjoy listening to them. Okay, so now I'm going to fill in the different stat categories. Again, I read 11, 6 were physical, and 4 were audio, which I know doesn't matter, but I just have noticed that in the category of physical and audio, it seems to always work out to 6 and 4, and then maybe a Kindle or maybe not a Kindle. But there was one Kindle, and then the total pages was 3,941. So again, a great month, and I listened to less books this month, but school was wrapping up, and I also had my big trip to see my friend in Washington at the beginning of the month. So that's why there was a little bit less listening. So I only found 2 library receipts, and I'm just going to assume those are the only ones, and I added up the savings, and the savings is $279.82, which is just amazing. So again, that's where I always get my books. I don't really buy any of my books. Okay. Moving on to my shelfie, I am working on the 3rd row, and I'm going to wind up filling in 3 stacks of books. I started off the month with another book that I just randomly picked off the shelf. If you remember, I think it was in January or February, I pulled a book off the shelf and I hadn't read anything about it. I hadn't done anything. So it was kind of like one of those blind date type of things with a book, and I did that again for The Little Liar, which was by Mitch Albom. I think I'm saying his last name right, but it was a historical fiction book about World War II and a little boy who was basically tricked into spreading the word about basically a special place that the Jewish could go, when in actuality it was just the imprisonment prison camps. So it was very interesting, and I believe it's based off of a true story. Okay, filling in and coloring in the different books and using the same colored pencils, and the green the green one that adds a little bit of color. I like that, but I'm already thinking about next year and how I can do things a little different, because trying to keep track of this group of colored pencils for the coloring in of my shelf is kind of ridiculous at this point. Okay, so I pick a light, I don't know, peach color. for my books and fill it in all the way to 64, and it is coming along really nicely. And when I looked back at the Goodreads, it's definitely very Easter looking and spring-ish looking with my Goodreads. And then for June is going to be an amazing month. So far, it's my biggest month of reading. June was 18 books, so that is just amazing. I added some books to the ABC. I did D for Done and Dusted, and then T for This Could Be Us. I also added some more books to the different genres. I even added my first one to BIPOC. I think that's how you say the acronym. But I've told you guys before, I do a terrible job of paying attention to who the authors are. And so, but I knew that Kennedy Ryan falls into that category. So I'm glad that I could add that in. Okay, so for the USA challenge, I did 2, and those were in New England for Frozen River. Southwest was Done and Dusted. So I think I have about 6 or 7 left. So going a little slow. I don't know if I've told you guys, but there is so many books that take place in New York, and I tend to read them all. So I probably should go back and look at some of my books and see if they take place in anywhere else, so that way I could count them from the challenge, or else just try to find new books that could work. I do have, for the month of June, I did wind up reading 2 books, so I guess I don't have that many. For all the romance, you can see I read a bunch. I think it was 5. And I finally started on that series. I think it's Rebel Ranch series, but it's Done and Dusted and then Swifted and Saddled. I don't know, but the first one is Done and Dusted, and I absolutely loved it. And then the third one comes out in November, and I just love it. Okay, so now for May, I of course always start with the calendar and try my best to draw straight lines. I have noticed that if this is not like a new Sharpie pen, and like the nub is a little small, it makes it harder to draw the straight lines. I also had a really hard time deciding on what colors and like what kit and what supplies I would use to put together my May spread. I had no idea. I went through, I think, 3 or 4 different options. I remember mentioning in my printables video that I was going to use a Ashley Horton reading kit, but I wound up not using that kit, and then I decided to go with something else that didn't work. Finally, I settled on a Sweet Bean Plans journal kit that I'm going to use for this month, and it actually coordinates perfectly with my favorite book, and I did not do that intentionally. It just wound up that way. Sweet Bean Plans is a sticker shop that I love to use for my Hobonichi cousin, but I have now found a use for it in my reading journal. And you guys know that I absolutely love figuring out multiple ways that you can use supplies in different projects. So that is what I'm going to do in this project, and I absolutely love how it came together. It's just perfect. So I grabbed several markers so that way I could test out and see which one I wanted to use for the circle. That way I could make my dates. And because I have goofed up this whole thing a few times, I'm always like triple checking to make sure I started and ended the calendar on the correct days, and I did this time, so that is awesome. And then I can start to place my stickers. So in the journaling kit, there's like these torn edges, I want to say. It's almost like faux paper, but her stickers are a vinyl kind of shiny material. So I put one in the corner with like a yellow boot and then a little yellow piece up in the top left corner, and I love how those turned out. I just love the fact that I was able to finally not only figure out what I was going to use or what supplies I was going to use for my May journal, but also that I found something kind of different to use. Her journaling kit also comes with these larger stickers, and I really wanted to use at least one, if not two. And I have one so far, spring reading, and then I'm going to try to get the big circle sticker on as well. I first want to put some washi down at the bottom of the calendar. My sweet friend Jen sent me a little sampler of some washi tape, so that is what I'm using for the bottom. And I love Sweet Bean Plan's reading journal stickers. She has such a wide variety of stickers and also washi tape. Okay, so my May did not stamp correctly the first time, so I stamped it again. And you know how sometimes when you stamp and then it slips a little, it can do like a 3D imaging almost, and it's like hard on your eyes. That's kind of what this May is, but I did not go back and, like cover it up. I just didn't. I was like, I'm just gonna leave it. It looks a little funky, but it will work. So I was able to get that big circle sticker, and I just put it right on the edge, and then that way I have kind of a nice diagonal with all the different sticker pieces that I'm adding. The kit also has some books that I'm going to add to it, and then busy reading, I'm going to put that in the 2 empty boxes up by the top of the calendar. I also decided to add a few more stamped phrases below May. So I add book lover for life and make time for reading. And then I noticed on the circle sticker with the stack of books that there's like hearts coming up. And so I decided to kind of recreate that. And I'm not sure if it completely worked. I started off doing some yellow hearts, and then some green hearts, and then some pink hearts. And when I stamped, or I got to the end of my stamping on the left-hand side, it looked good, except that I had stamped a green heart right by busy reading, and I just didn't like it. I want it to look like a cascade of hearts like coming down, and so I covered up the heart that I stamped by busy reading, and then just re-stamped the green heart in a different spot, so that way it did look like that cascading. So I also put let's get lit to stamp one more phrase over the top of busy reading. That way there is stamped phrases in 2 other spots, or another spot besides just below May. Okay, so now I can start on adding in my dates that I've read these various books. Like I mentioned earlier, I started the month with The Little Liar. The next book I read was Wayward, which is a really, really fantastic book. My first audio of the month was Listen for the Lie, which was also really good. Wayward, I think, if I remember right, was a magical realism book, and it's going to be a favorite book for May, so I will have a process video for that. I also read a romance book called Finn Rhodes Forever. I meant to read that last year, part of the Rate the Romance challenge, and I never got around to it, so I just decided, why not? I'll just read it right now. I also mixed up an audio and a physical book, because I like to put the physical books on the top of the calendar boxes and the audio down at the bottom. And I mixed up Hot Mess Summer and Done and Dusted. And I don't know, it just bugged me. I don't know if I did a hand gesture in the video or not, but I was totally frustrated. It's really not that big of a deal, but you know how you want things to go a certain way with your project and then they don't? It's just frustrating. But anyways, moving on. The next book that I tackled was a really huge one, The Frozen River, and I absolutely loved it. I was almost tempted to save it for like winter, because I'm very much a seasonal, or for the most part, I'm a seasonal reader. But I decided to go ahead and read The Frozen River, and it is a fantastic historical fiction book based off of a true story of a woman named Martha Ballard. I think I'm saying that right, but it's 18th century. She is a midwife and keeps a meticulous diary of what goes on with the births and deaths that she helps with, and she finds herself involved in figuring out a murder in the town. And it's just a really fascinating book, very atmospheric, and I absolutely loved Martha, the character. I actually have been meaning to look up if there's another book that I can read about her that is the nonfiction take. Okay, so that is how my calendar page turned out. I love it. It's very colorful, very spring feeling. Moving on to the stats page, I like to start down at the bottom so that way I know I have room for all the pieces that I want on the left-hand side page. So what I start with at the bottom is the 3 different random categories that I pick. I wanted to write them out this time. That way I knew I could think in my head what number I needed to stamp. So the categories are faves, USA challenge, and then average days to finish. I think there was an update in the StoryGraph app, and so now it tells me the average days it takes me to finish a book. So I decided to include that, and that was 4 days to finish a book, and then USA challenge was 2. And then I had 4 favorite books. Like I said, there was a lot of really great books that I read that really touched me. Nonfiction, I only read 1 out of 11 books, and that was the Viola Davis memoir, which was gripping and haunting and emotional, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Stephanie Howell, she is on Instagram. She recommended that book to everybody, and I'm so glad that she did because I loved it. I just kind of do an estimate as far as filling in the box or the bar graph for the fiction and nonfiction, and then just color it in. The next categories that I'm going to do are physical, Kindle, and audio. So again, I already mentioned this, but physical was 6 books, audio was 4, and then there was 1 Kindle book, which was the Finn Rhodes book, since that is on Kindle Unlimited. The next part that I'm going to work on is, of course, the boxes for the various emotions, because StoryGraph helps you to figure out which emotions your books are that you have been reading, which is really cool. Sometimes I look at the reviews or what the emotion is and I don't quite agree, but for the most part, it works, and I like including this in my reading stats. Okay, so I thought I would be fun and different to stagger my square boxes on the right-hand side, and it does not look good. I don't like it at all, but I can't go back and change it. So I just moved on to adding in my little circle for the pie chart. But before I get to that, I want to do some of the stats on the right-hand side. So I start with average rating, which was 4.45, a really high rating this month. But that, like I said, that's because I had quite a few 5-star books that I thoroughly enjoyed. I think after this is when I start on tackling the bar graph. And if you've been following for a while, you know that I have had such an issue with bar graphs. I think the problem is that I need to make the favorite book, I need to make that smaller, and that way it can give me more room to make the bar graph. But overall, I think this is probably my best bar graph that I did. I, of course, did it in pencil first, so that way I could see how it looks. And then I turned the book, and I thought I would do the StoryGraph app where they kind of tilt the numbers, but I didn't like that. So once I go to do it in pen, I'm just going to write it so that way you can see it, if that makes sense. Because as you can see with this pencil marking, I have the numbers written almost on their sides, and I just didn't like that, so I'll change it. Okay, so I'm almost done with this. It was pretty hilarious, you guys. I actually took out a lot of the a lot of the footage of me trying to figure out this bar graph because I want it to look decent, you know, I want it to look like it's actually to scale, so that makes it even more tricky, but I think I got it this time. And this is when I can use all the different colors. And again, I had no idea that the Sweet Bean plans and the Ready or Not cover would coordinate as far as colors. No idea, but it worked out really well. So on like the x-axis, which is going horizontal, I have 3.75, and then it moves up in increments of 0.25 or a quarter. For each increment. And then on the y-axis going vertical, it's just 1 and then skip a line 2. So it goes up by half. So that's a little math technical terms, right? So like I said, I had 4 favorites, and then my lowest rating was a 3.75. So again, I didn't read any books that were really low on the scale or low on the ratings. But I do tend to look at Goodreads and Storygraph, and if there is a book that is below 3.5, I tend to stay away from it. And I don't know if that makes me like a book snob or what, but I just figure there's so many books in this world, so many books constantly coming out, that there really is no point to reading a book that's below 3.5. It just probably won't resonate with me. At least that's what I think. Maybe, like I said, maybe I'm just a snob. Okay, I've picked out my colors and filled in all of the different bar graph pieces, and now I'm going to do hours listened, which again was 26.97. So not a lot this month, but I still listened, and that is great. After that comes adding in the lines for different genres. And I think it was last month I was telling you guys in April that I only read like 2 different genres, which I'm not sure if that has ever happened. But yeah, 2 genres or 3 in April. Not the case for this month. I'm obviously all over the place, so I went back over and stamped May stats using an Ali Edwards alpha stamp. And I don't know if it's straight or not, but it's just a title and it doesn't need to be perfect, does it? And I have decided that I do need some more alphas, at least alphas that are smaller, because I really wanted to use a bigger alpha, but it just didn't work with where I put the circle. So I need more alphas. That's just what I've decided. More alpha stamps would work great. Okay, so the genres, I finally put those lines down, and I have romance, historical, thriller, young adult, memoir, and science fiction. I think I even had a few more, but I decided to just not add those in. I only need a few, just a little sample of the different genres. Now I'm going to divide up my pie chart. First, using a pencil in case I have to adjust it, which always seems to happen. And I also wound up with 7 categories. I used to only do 6 because 6 was, I don't know, 6 was just the number I used to do. And now I'm winding up with 7. So I add another box to the right-hand side of my emotions, if that makes sense. So I add another little spot for the 7th emotion, and then once I have everything done in pencil, I will go ahead and fill it in with that Sharpie. And of course, as with most months, my main emotion, or the biggest emotion in my books, was emotional, which for this month I tend to agree there was a lot of emotional books. The next category was lighthearted, and then also funny was the 3rd one, which I found interesting. I don't remember what books it considered funny. And then next was mysterious, and then hopeful and dark and other. And like I've mentioned before, with this particular planner that I'm using, it's always better to just use colored pencils because the markers tend to bleed through. So I fill in the pie section, then I fill in the little square that corresponds in the key, I guess we could call it the key, and then I write in the emotion that it corresponds to. And let's see, right now I am reading God of the Woods. Is that what it's called? God of the Woods, God in the Woods. It's a book everybody's talking about a summer camp in 1975. So that is what I'm reading. And then what I'm listening to is The Last Beekeeper. I'm also listening to Malala, that her memoir, but I have ordered a physical copy so that way I could follow along and kind of reread some sections and look up some words that I don't know. So I kind of have 3 books going right now, and I'd love to know what you guys are currently reading. As you can see, I put down a really dark pink for one of the slices, and I did not like it. I felt like it stuck out like a sore thumb. So I went ahead and fixed it and added in a pie section that was a little bit of a different pink color, and overall it worked really well. So once I cut it out, I like swept it off my desk onto the floor. So I had to pick it up, and I think I picked up the right slice. But either way, I was able to grab the circle and my X-Acto knife and like trim off the extra. My next step is going to be adding some more detail over to where the favorite book is, and also some flowers. So that way it coordinates not only with my favorite book, but also with the calendar. I wanted a spot for total books read, so that's 11. I didn't want to forget that. I almost forgot that. And then I'm going to grab some stamps from Syncopation Designs and place those. So I have this one that says emotionally attached to characters, and I love that stamp because it's so true. Oh, and I almost forgot total number of pages. So I squeezed that in down at the very, very bottom, and I think I've already mentioned it. It's 3,941 pages for the month, but I'm glad I did not forget that. This, again, is why I generally plan out my entire stats page in pencil. I did not do that this time, so that's why things were a little bit trickier. And now I know. Note to self, make sure you plan it out in pencil so that way it's easier and quicker when you're trying to put it together to share with you guys. So I stamped emotionally attached to the characters. Then I also stamped read more. Over on the left hand side, I'm going to stamp bibliotherapy, and then of course some flowers in pink and yellow, and then a greenery in green. So really pretty colors that I have going, and I just love it for the book Ready or Not. Ready or Not is about an unplanned pregnancy and how that evolves into a beautiful romance, not with the dad of the baby, but someone else. And it's just an extraordinary, heartwarming story about coming together, working together through, difficult things and finding love. And it will definitely be in my top 10 favorite books for the year, and I'll even share it as a favorite process video for May, because I loved it. There were so many good things about that book. Okay, so I'm coloring in some of the stamps, and I love how that adds a little extra something, and I'm just about done putting together my May stats. And as always, I love sharing this with you guys. And I don't know, did I already mention it? But I want to know what you guys are reading and how summer is going for you and your reading. There was a little gap in between the genres and the total books, and I thought it would be fun to add another stamped sentiment there. So I added Let's Get Lit and then colored it in orange, and also the book on the left-hand side, so that way it kind of coordinates. So there you go. Have a wonderful day. Bye.